Good evening and welcome everyone. I'm John Spires, Chief Executive of the Royal Free Charity. This event is part of a series of talks hosted by the Royal Free Charity, and we bring these to you as a way of showcasing some of the outstanding work at the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust. Previous episodes have featured cutting-edge research, clinical innovations, and best practice in the delivery of patient care. Many of the subjects that we feature in these talks have received Royal Free Charity funding, and in many cases, they also benefit from the range of services that we offer. Our volunteers work across the trust in a myriad of roles. We run a complementary therapy service for patients, and we have a support hub offering welfare advice for patients with long-term conditions. None of that, of course, would be possible without the generosity of our donors and our supporters. Many of you watching today will have supported the charity by giving your time, your money, or your advocacy, and I want to take the opportunity to thank you. It's because of that support that we and the Royal Free London can go beyond the limitations of NHS funding to achieve our joint clinical and research ambitions. Welcome back to those of you who've joined us before. For the benefit of those joining us today for the first time, I'm going to run through tonight's format. In a moment, I'll be introducing and handing over to our guest speakers. After their talk, I'll be putting your questions to them. You can type questions in the Q&A box at any point during the talk, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions as possible at the end. We're recording tonight's event, and we'll be posting it on our RFC Presents YouTube channel, where you can also find all of the recordings of the earlier events in our series. If you're tweeting about the event tonight, please use the hashtag RFC Presents. But now to the talk itself. I'm very pleased to introduce from the Royal Free London, James Davis, Chief Innovation Officer, and Sam Ingram, Divisional Director of Innovation Operations. James and Sam join us this evening to tell us about the biggest innovation and automation consultancy in the NHS and how it benefits our staff, patients, and the wider health system. They'll explain how the principles of courage, collaboration, and partnership have been central to the evolution of their team. And we'll hear how the generosity of our supporters has helped them to go further and faster. James, Sam, over to you.
Many thanks, John. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen so everybody can see the slides that we're going to speak to. I think first and foremost, Sam and I both want to unitedly, on behalf of our entire team, thank the charity for the opportunity to speak here this evening and for their unfailing and unwavering support of everything that we've been able to achieve over the last couple of years throughout the pandemic and now as we experience life post-pandemic. So we're going to speak to you this evening about innovation by the NHS for the NHS from the biggest internal digital consultancy that the system has ever seen. That to be fact-checked, but I'm pretty sure it's close to being true. So let's just say it is. So what do we mean when we talk about innovation? It's important to have a definition for the term because, like everybody else, we all like to make up our own interpretation of something. And you can ask 20 people walking down the street, what does the word innovation mean? And you get 20 different answers. And that's no good if you're on a show like Family Fortunes, that's for sure. So we make sure that we have a really clear definition of what that word means. The purpose being is that then everything that we then build and layer on top is all for that unique and defined vision and definition. So we define it this way across our group. We define innovation as a new idea, whether it be big or small, that creates or changes a service category. But importantly, that innovation needs to bring significant value to the user base, to the service providers, but importantly, our organisation, our group of hospitals here at the Royal Free, across Hampstead, Barnet and Chase Farm. And importantly, our integrated care system, our region in London at scale, and our entire United Kingdom. And we undertake a number of things to make that happen that Sam's going to touch on in just a moment. But really, to bring to life this definition, we've got a clear why statement, why we do what we do. And that is articulated through our vision and mission. We really want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to accelerate the Royal Free London's group uptake and culture in delivery of innovation and automation. The reason being is we believe we need to foster the beginnings of a sustainable service that's born from within our walls to support our patients and staff, meeting the challenges we see today, but importantly, looking forward to that horizon and doing everything that we can to meet the challenges and the things that we need to accomplish tomorrow. With that vision of being a leader, not just locally, but nationally in delivering innovation by the NHS for the NHS, taking things further and faster for all. So what do we do? Sam?
Thanks, James. As James has alluded to, we have a really vast and large range of services within the consultancy that we've set up. But just taking a step back before we take you through some of these, many of you will work in NHS Trust, some of you will work in the Royal Free itself, and you'll know that the Free has a long and rich history of research and development. Something the Trust is really well known for, and it's great that we now are working in partnership with our research and development team and also with the charity to be able to bring forward some of the innovations that naturally exist within any NHS Trust. There's many people who will say the NHS is not innovative, stuck in the dark ages, lots of bureaucracy. Actually, if you look at the research and innovation that happens naturally, many teams across the NHS are probably preaching to the converted, but innovation is a natural thing that exists. And we've built up consultancy, as James said, within the Royal Free London over the last 2 years, from a team of 6 to a team of just over 40, with a wide range of services, which I'm going to speak to you now about. But it's quite unusual to have that size and scale of a consultancy within an NHS provider, and it's testament to the Trust's ambition and vision that we've been able to do this. We're a commercial entity within the Trust. We're designed to be revenue generating and not at any cost to the Trust. So many of these services are set up like an external consultancy, but as James has said, doing that work by the NHS for the NHS at Agenda for Change rates. That's really important. So we have 3 main pillars of our business in terms of our services, intelligent automation being one, digital applications and service redesign being another, and then the very Star Trek-y sounding new frontiers that comprises artificial intelligence and mixed realities, extended realities, which we'll talk about in more detail later. But just to give you a little taster of each of those. So intelligent automation is what we call it. Many of you will have heard of RPA, robotic process automation, and that's led by our Chief Technology Officer, Darren Atkins, who is an expert in RPA within the NHS. So we are the largest centre of excellence for RPA. We run a range of services for automation for about 68 trusts up and down the country, and that's in clinical, things like elective access, and non-clinical, so things like back office recruitment, finance, accounts, etc. services. We also provide, as well as just doing the automations ourselves, we provide advice and guidance to Trust about how to set up this capability within their organisations, and we support with business case and process mappings, things like that. James will talk in more detail in a moment about the scale of the automation work that we do with our trusts. The next pillar of our services are digital applications and products. So we have a small team internally that develops digital apps. We often send proposals for innovations, and people think that it needs to be an app. Actually, it's one of those myths. Not everything needs to be an app. Sometimes you just need a Microsoft form or something less innovative, but we do design our own apps and platforms, and that includes for large clients like the Department of Health and Social Care, and also creating low-code, no-code apps internally to be able to have an impact within the Trust. And again, James is going to walk you through a few case studies of some of the digital products we have created for our customers. Then we have a lot of discovery work around artificial intelligence, and AI is something that's there's a lot of discussion about its big buzzword at the moment, and lots of talk about actually implementing AI. But we've done a really intensive piece of work around AI discovery, actually understanding what is out there and what is being used in a health setting, what some of the challenges are around it. So we are running a project around diagnosis, doing a retrospective study in breast surgery, but we're also doing a huge piece of work around AI discovery, which we'll talk to you in more detail about later. And then finally, you've got the VR icon there, but you'll learn in a minute, VR is just one part of the puzzle. So we have an expansive extended realities program of work supported by our colleagues and the XR Health Alliance, which is a small not-for-profit organisation. And we have a number of work streams around staff and patient wellbeing, clinical diagnosis and treatment and training and education. And we'll talk in more detail on that. Lastly, something that we are setting up at the moment is an innovation incubator to bring together colleagues from NHS Trust and industry to take innovation proposals to the next level. And we have a digital innovation steering group, which is the genesis of that concept. That gives you an overview of the services that we offer. James?
Awesome. Thank you for that overview, Sam. I think being candid and transparent, as I tend to be, whether it's career limiting or not, that incubator is something that we've been meaning to work on probably for at least the last 9 to 12 months. But things within the hospital walls have been extremely busy as a team. As you can see, we've been extremely busy, but we're super excited about that. And when we spoke earlier about creating a sustainable part of our organization, that is definitely one avenue that we see being able to do that, to be able to develop and really own at scale our own intellectual property and rights within organizations as they grow and scale within the system. Using our expertise is really an exciting prospect for us. Next, I want to expand a little bit and share a bit more about how it is we take all of these awesome capabilities and unpack them across the entire system. So although we're a provider organization, we don't just focus on acute care. We have now just under 70 different organizations that we provide our services to across secondary, primary, ambulatory, mental, social, and even local council. We provide these services, and we partner with the relevant parts of industry to deliver the best and most cutting edge innovations around. You can see here on this screen, we're not even able to fit in all of the organizations that we currently have the privilege of working with. And what this means is we're really able to expand our horizons to understand the challenges that not only the Royal Free face, but the NHS at scale, at every level faces, so that when we go to build innovations, we make sure that they're relevant to society and those that are going to be using them. To ensure that relevance, we work on supporting innovation at every stage of ideation. That means before the idea, we will put in effort in prioritization, making sure things align with our strategy, make sure there's the capacity and resource to deliver. And then we facilitate those great ideas to be nurtured. So like Sam said, we've got our group-wide innovation steering group, which has a great quorum membership and is chaired by our CCIO. Then after that idea, we continue to support in a number of different ways. So I've got a bit of a dry throat. Okay, moving on. We take those concepts and that approach, and we work really hard with a vast range of stakeholders to make sure that what we design and what we deliver will be adopted. The worst thing you want as an innovator is to build something that you believe is beautiful. You've been in your tool shed, had all your tools out, and you're making this great, beautiful thing. Then you come out your tool shed and you show it to mum and dad, and they're like, well, I can't even tell what that is. So it's even worse in a professional setting. If you do things in a closed environment without consulting anybody, then bring it out to the big world, our clinical colleagues, our operational colleagues, our back office staff, and we say, look at this great thing we've done. And they turn around and say, well, not only does it not work, but you've actually made my job worse and harder. And that is the worst thing that can happen. But sadly, that's something that's common throughout industry, especially in technology. So we focus really hard on hitting the middle of this Venn diagram, removing things that are impossible, pointless, and pure fantasy to make sure that we focus on each individual users and the business and the technology and how we can bring them all together in one beautiful solution. But it's not just making sure the technology stack works. There's no point in giving technology to people if it's disgusting to use. We create digital products that are beautiful to use and frictionless to access. And we do that by putting a lot of emphasis on the user experience. So what does it look like? What does it feel like? How is it to interact with? The best example I can give you of that is streaming services that we see today. Maybe you use Netflix or Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Now TV, Paramount. I mean, the list is going on and on and on. But there'll be those that you enjoy as your default that you go to, and there'll be those that you use because maybe it's got a particular show that you want. But whilst you're accessing the menus you're screaming at your partner, your friends, your housemates, at what a painful and agonizing process it is to use that platform. But it does the same thing. It still streams video just like the others do, but the user experience and the user interface turns your stomach. And that is what we want to avoid. We want to build beautiful things that work for our people and that are a joy to use. We do this by employing an agile process to how we go about our work. We make sure we work really hard in discovery, like Sam mentioned earlier, understanding the problem, the benefits, and what good looks like. We recruit a whole vast range of users. Those that are going to be inputting data, those are going to be accessing data, and we build a backlist of user stories. So as a nurse, I would like to do X so that I can Y. And by building these user stories, when we then go into production for a digital platform or product, we already know that it's going to be built to the requirements of exactly the people that are going to be using it. We use this mechanism on the screen now to manage our group-wide digital innovation steering group. This facilitates anybody within our organization to drop in an idea or concept at any one of the 4 gateways that can then be evaluated by their peers. So now we're going to show you a couple of case studies which help unpack how we've taken that methodology, that approach, and actually brought it to life. Sam mentioned a case study for the Department of Health, and that is a platform called Lantern that we created at the beginning of the pandemic. So we worked really hard to put in user discovery. The reason being is Lantern was built to facilitate a completely different type of COVID testing that required a sputum, a spit test into a little pot. That was because there was investigations at that time in how it is we can take different approaches to COVID testing that weren't lateral flow or PCR. Also, there was environments that PCR testing wasn't welcoming or wasn't being able to be adopted in secure settings, special educational needs settings, for example, and other care settings too. So we went about creating Lantern in partnership with a raft of different organizations. And we most recently received a highly commended award from the Academic Health Science Network for our work in Lantern. We built a user-centric design, and what we ended up with is a beautiful cloud-based laboratory information management system that is connected to every single lab in the country. What that means now is the Royal Free has the ability to request and result a test from anywhere to any lab in the country and result right back down to the patient and to the clinician once more. But we don't want to stop there with Lantern. We want to continue with our ambition. So our ambition for Lantern is continue to grow and scale it. One of the things that have come out of the back of COVID most definitely is people's comfort with at-home testing. So currently we're working with national colleagues to see how we can once again bring that lab home to you for the purpose of cancer screening. The country is trying as hard as possible to identify 75% of cancers at stage 1 and stage 2. As it is one of the biggest killers that we see, not only in our country, but worldwide. And there is a number of things that we can start to do in partnership with our colleagues in public health and national screening to help us identify cancers that could otherwise be dealt with at an earlier stage. An example of that being HPV. That leads to 9 out of 10 cervical cancers in women, and if identified, is treatable and then avoidable. And we're working with colleagues, as I said, to see how we can use our platform for that. And that's something that we're really proud of, to be able to work with the charity on, as the charity also drives to see how it is we can attack cancer within our country. Another product to share with you is one called NHS Your Way. Now, unfortunately, from time to time, we don't just work for the Royal Free and the NHS, we have to access the NHS's services. I myself am a patient at Addenbrooke's and at Broomfield Hospital in Essex because of my comorbidities. And there's many a time where I wonder where I am in my care pathway. And sometimes I even have to go for emergent care, but none of us ever know where it is we can receive that care in the most expedient way. And that is the gap that we identified in the market. So we're currently working with our ICS to build a platform that would allow us to place that information at the fingertips of the public. So based on your geographical location, in real time, you'd be able to see the current wait time at any A&E or urgent treatment centre. That means that instead of going to Homerton, you could go to Imperial. It might take you half an hour longer to get there, but you might be seen an hour faster. That would contribute towards demand smoothing and also mean that you have a better journey in terms of getting access to that care that you desperately need more expediently. There's national platforms as well that this solution weaves into, such as My Plan Care, which gives an overarching view of the average wait for elective care pathways. We're also working with our colleagues across London too to see how we can take their real-time and historic data to build that in for elective care within NHS Your Way. So at the point where you go and see your GP, because you need to be referred onto a care pathway, you as a patient can then be informed as to where you would like that care to be referred to based on the best outcomes or the most expedient care that you would like to receive. We've spent a lot of time speaking with patients and they've told us about the need and the desire for a platform like this. Care professionals too welcome the introduction of a system like this to help smooth demand, but also identify who is going where and when. And we're really excited to see the difference it can make to health and care within our local population. Last one from me before, I've got a couple more to show you before I pass on to Sam. This is for our London ambulance service. It's a really busy service, which isn't a surprise to you, I'm sure. So there's 6,000 staff in LAS, but nearly 600 ambulances, 800 crews a day, all charged with being in the right place at the right time in the quickest manner possible. And I think it's fair to say our ambulance crews do an incredible job at being there for us when we most need them. And, you know, when you're in that situation where you're in a high pressure environment, where people need you at their most desperate, how important it is that you have the right data at the right time to deliver the right care. Our ambulance service definitely needs that. And we were charged with trying to make something that was quite complex into something as simple as it possibly could be. In order to access that data at the right place at the right time, our ambulance service interrogate a platform called the Health Information Exchange. And there is an organisation, One London, that has the One London Shared Care Record, which is the HIE, or the Health Information Exchange. And every care setting from mental, social, primary and secondary shares data about us individually in a governed, safe and secure way for the purpose of providing us care should we need it in an emergent setting. However, our ambulance crews are interrogating this data on an iPad using Apple platform. Now, the way it renders, which I'll show you in a moment, is very detailed and complex, which is great if you're sat still with a big screen. But if you're bouncing along a busy London road and you're trying to use your iPad, it can become quite tricky. So we employed our design principles. We wanted to make sure it was feasible, viable and desirable, and it was beautiful to use. We analysed the One London architecture just to help you appreciate the scale of this operation. Gary McAllister is the One London Chief Technology Officer, and him and his team worked tirelessly to deliver this model, all for the better care of Londoners. So what did it look like? Here, using dummy data, you can see what that care record used to look like using the HIE. Now, you can imagine you might be sitting on a comfy chair at the moment, looking at your computer screen, asking yourself, well, what's the problem? I can read that absolutely fine. I challenge you once again to imagine what that's like on your iPad while you're driving down the road with blue lights flashing, getting to someone by the roadside as fast as you possibly can, or it's nighttime, or it's a blazing summer, or it's raining, and you need to interrogate the lab results on somebody and understand what's happened to them most recently so you can then make your next decision. So we took this information and our team went away and they performed a number of different workshops with paramedics and with a vast variety of different staff members, and we delivered this view. So now we have a beautiful, clean, iOS-friendly interrogation of the very same data, and it allows us to surface this information in a user-friendly way. Each member is able to customize their view and manipulate the different tiles that you see. We're able to alert and respond to different alerts and color code the information that's provided. Really, now we have big buttons, clear information provided in a concise, user-friendly way that's intuitive to use. That now means our London ambulance service has access to the right data at the right place at the right time in an easy to consume format. So we're really proud of this piece of work, and we're thankful for them for taking us on that journey. Before I run out of breath, and the last thing I speak about, or the penultimate thing I speak about before I pass over to Sam to discuss all things New Frontiers, is intelligent automation. Now, automation can be seen as maybe something that's quite scary. Robots are taking over the world and so forth, but that isn't quite the case. We specialize in intelligent automation, or RPA, robotic process automation. Now, what that actually means is using a cloud-based autonomous workforce, we can augment or replicate the input of any activity through a keyboard and mouse into any digital application, both health-specific and non-health specific. When we take that ability and we combine it with the abilities within artificial intelligence and intelligent optical character recognition, it means we can go a level further, and we can start then processing invoices, payroll, referrals, job offers, inter-authority transfers, identity checks, and the world then opens up. And we've been able to do some great things combining these technologies. We then implement forms so we can collect data from any source. And we have the ability to use chatbots, but I'll tell you, we don't really use them because I don't know anyone to date that's had a fun experience with a chatbot yet. The technology hopefully will catch up with our ability to deliver it. So here's an example of what that looks like. This is an example of how we can use automation within a clinical setting for our constituents of our population that don't have English as their native tongue. And this is how we can change a summary notification or an outpatient letter into a native language by the time they reach the car park. I don't think we have a huge Japanese demographic, but we use that within this demonstration because it's so easy to see. And what you can see here is the robot reading, interpreting, translating that text, and updating the letter. The video that you're seeing has been slowed down by about a factor of 10. The robots work at machine speed, but can only work at the pace of a digital application or a web application. And as you can tell, that means we can undertake an activity that might take a human 5 minutes to do in under a second. When you count that by the number of outpatient interactions we have through any activity, you can quickly see how we've been able to return over 300,000 hours back to the NHS in the last calendar year. That's over 155 full-time equivalents. Within recruitment, in one process alone, was able to help release 4 whole-time equivalents. By release, I don't mean pack their bags and send them home. I mean release to undertake more value-add and emotionally intelligent tasks. We're removing the mundane and the repetitive so that our staff are able to undertake more rewarding tasks and activities. One of our most valued is when we're able to impact that in a clinical setting. For one process, our back office team over in Enfield Civic Centre, who handle our referrals, was able to implement a process that saw 6 full-time equivalents to be able to be redeployed to booking and actually speaking to patients rather than transposing our referral data from ERS into our electronic patient record. And they were so happy, they threw a little party and sent us a picture. And that is what keeps us going, that picture in the middle, because we believe that technology can make people's lives better. And that's why we do what we do, whether it's our patients, whether it's our people. If we can take our skills and abilities to change lives and make people's lives richer, better, and more enjoyable, then that pushes us further and faster. And we're so proud to be able to do that with our charity. So now I'm going to pass you over to Sam, who's going to take you through some of our new frontiers.
Thanks, James. And don't worry, we're on a home straight now, so not too many more slides. We try not to do death by PowerPoint. We've talked through our digital products and applications pillar, but within New Frontiers and AI and XR being the ones that comprise those, we also carry out some discovery work for the trust and other teams who could learn from that. So not everything that we do is about implementation. And as I alluded to earlier, there's a lot of talk about AI and how to implement it and how it can support the NHS at the moment. One of the projects that we are running is called MIA, and working with a supplier called Chiron to look at retrospective study of breast surgery mammograms to look at the efficacy of an AI tool. But that isn't our main focus that we're going to talk you through now. This is a piece of discovery work that two of our amazing innovation consultants, Katie and Alice, carried out with support from the rest of the team. And it just gives a little bit of knowledge sharing around AI maturity, which we thought you might find interesting. So you can see on the right-hand side a sort of algorithm of different phases of AI, from proof of concept through to a commercialized product, and the level of maturity that exists within the wider system. And there's an anecdote sort of from the London AI Centre there that it can take around 6 years from proof of concept to commercialization. And anything that's in even that far right phase, the commercialized product, can actually still fail to realize their proposed benefits due to a number of challenges that we'll talk about in a second. So it's really important that we actually understand the capability and the capacity required to support a successful implementation, and don't just jump to doing that. Next slide, please, James. So these are some of the challenges that we have identified through the discovery work that we've done, and I'm not going to read all these to you, but just to highlight a couple. So there's a number of frameworks that are in place to ensure that any technologies are using AI are safe and ethically robust, but actually policy and strategy aren't moving at the same pace. There's a really useful paper, if anyone's interested, called Gender Shades, that exposed the lack of fair AI and led to the creation of a checklist looking at that. Similarly, there's gaps and errors in the data, which have raised concerns around the lack of ethnicity and darker skin types in training data sets, which is being developed, but there remains a concern in that respect. Studies, as I just talked about, we're conducting a retrospective study, and a large proportion of these are retrospective rather than prospective, which means that they don't reflect the clinical settings, and that can limit the availability of the data in terms of what real-world performance can be. And clearly, there are concerns around adopting too quickly. So there are quite a lot of products already on the market which make bold claims around their power of AI and the benefits. And this was a particular discovery report around skin cancer triage. But it's really important that those don't then have unintended consequences around increasing referrals due to an overclassification because the specificity is too high. Next slide. Thanks, James. I think we're on a slight delay. Clearly, there are some concerns around ethics and fairness as well. So we talked about ethnicity a moment ago, but there's a bit of a lack of transparency around ethnicity data and skin types within training sets. And this is partly due to a shortage of data. So a particular concern around population groups as well. And exclusions from data for AI in dermatology is particular, not just in terms of types of lesions, but skin pigmentation as well. So that limits the overall diagnostic accuracy. Understandably, we're all patients as well, and we all have concerns around who's using our data, who owns it, and there's issues around the practicality of applying these NHS opt-outs and being able to support patients with opting out of those tools. And clearly, if AI is going to be used as a tool by clinicians, then they need to understand how confident the predictions are. And some of those may be less confident than others. Next slide. And then finally, clearly there's some considerations around public perception and trust of AI, and that's probably the thing that is in the news and reported as most of all. So that's something that we need to make sure that patients are actually seeing the benefits of AI if we are trialing the implementation, and ensuring that consent is really well managed so that the public can feel confident that any data that fuels the development of new algorithms is being used safely, as well as having some assurance around diagnosis perception. So there's some stats there around a survey of patients on the perception of use of AI in skin cancer diagnosis, which is interesting, around people not being concerned so much if AI was used by a dermatologist, but in making sure a dermatologist is still present and examining, confirming that. And lastly, digital poverty is something that we're asked about a lot, and clearly not everyone has the same access to that, which means that there's an issue around equity in terms of AI tools. Next slide. So that gives you a summary of our AI work. And then lastly, I'm just going to give you an overview of our XR programme. And you might be wondering, what is XR? So to give you a bit of a 101 on that, there's a spectrum of realities, and there's another graphic which is really helpful that kind of outlines how immersed someone is in another reality versus very present in your actual reality. And extended reality, or XR, is the term that comprises all of these, but just to give a rundown, virtual reality is something that people may be more familiar with since COVID. The amount of teenagers and adults actually that purchased a headset in the last 2 years to help relieve the boredom of lockdown went up exponentially in the pandemic months. And so plugging a headset on, taking yourself out of your boring reality and being able to be fully immersed in a digital environment, that's VR. People are more familiar with that. Augmented reality, or AR, is a combination of presenting digital information, objects or media in the real world, and those things can appear as a flat graphic. Some people will use Snapchat, and that's kind of a good example of AR. And mixed reality is sort of similar to that, where objects are overlaid in a seemingly real form. Our work in our XR, or Extended Realities programme, is mainly focused on VR. We haven't used AR and MR as much, but I'm going to talk you through one of our projects in a moment. Next slide. So our programme of work is outlined here, and our aim is to try and use XR to radically change how we deliver care, improve staff wellbeing, and train our staff outside the constraints of our own reality. And the 3 work streams we have around staff and patient wellbeing, skills training and development, and clinical diagnosis and treatment. So within staff and patient wellbeing, we've been running a series of pilot workshops, which I'll talk about in more detail, and they have been supported by the charity. In skills training and development, we are looking at rolling out VR in leadership training and also clinical skills training and education. There's quite a number of trusts that are doing work in that space, and also looking at using 360 camera to film a patient journey at Chase Farm, provide some information to patients before they come in to ease anxiety and concerns before coming in for surgery. And then lastly, in clinical diagnosis and treatments, we are working on an app for physiotherapy with a company called Sync VR to develop an immersive experience for patients coming for rehab at the trust. And we're also looking and undertaking some clinical research projects as well. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about staff wellbeing just as an example of how the charity and donor funding has helped us to go further faster. And this is a fantastic project that we've been able to get off the ground in recent months around using VR for staff wellbeing. And there's just some background research here around other trusts and organisations that have used VR and carried out similar work to improve staff wellbeing. So there's some examples from the Royal Glamorgan and Prince Charles Hospital at Torbay in South Devon, Alderhay, and others, as well as more international partners. But the overriding theme here is that healthcare staff have found that VR can really reduce anxiety and stress relating to work and help with supporting the treatment of mental health disorders as well. And clearly, we have a significant workforce challenges within the NHS. The wellbeing offer that we can provide to staff is kind of getting worse, and we need to be doing more and more to be able to just provide something a little bit different and give something to staff. Thanks, James. Next slide. So the delivery phases for the staff wellbeing, VR for staff wellbeing project are laid out here. We did several pilots at Chase Farm and then expanded that to Barnet, the Royal Free and the satellite sites. And initially we had purchased about 10 headsets ourselves from within the team budget, and we're planning to do some pilots and get some data, and that was about it. We were then lucky enough to partner with our workforce colleagues on staff wellbeing, supported by the charity, on a bid, and have been able to use that funding to actually expand into a longer term strategy, reviewing and analysing our findings from those other phases, and actually create a selection of key immersive experiences for our staff and have hardware headsets available at each site. So that has made a massive difference in terms of what would have just been a pilot with some interesting data, but not be a BAU part of our staff wellbeing offer. Next slide. So in terms of some of the outcomes from the pilot phases, and clearly these will be increased as we roll out further, we ended up doing pilots with about 150, 200 staff, and 61% of staff reported better mood and decreased stress levels after using a VR headset to take a break and just go to a nature walk or lie on a beach for 5 minutes, or just do something that was more pleasant than being in a ward or a clinical environment. And we did it with non-clinical staff as well as clinical, but the impacts were still there. So 63% reporting lower stress, and 100% actually recommending it, which was surprising because VR isn't for everybody. It can cause motion sickness for some people. It's quite unusual, but it can do. But actually everybody who we ran the pilots with really enjoyed it. There was a lot of representation from our admin and clerical colleagues, but also nursing and midwifery, but we did reach nearly all staff groups in the pilots, and a fairly even age distribution, showing that actually you don't have to be young, and I can't call myself that anymore, but you don't have to be young to actually use a headset. It is for everybody and it's relatively easy to use, and the digital literacy element was really surprising, because although the majority of people were, maybe weren't familiar with VR, actually people were comfortable using it. Next slide. There we go. And this is just a little snapshot of some of the impact that these pilots have had, and we'll have a lot more of these as we roll out and are able to use some of the charity funding to put this into a business as usual staff wellbeing offer. So lots of people feeling less stressed, loving it, really finding it as something that they could do that's a relaxing way of taking a break. And I like the last one, which was, it was really refreshing, especially in our breaks. We were going to need more than one headset or it's going to be a bloodbath. That's my favourite one of the whole pilots. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip forward, but we do have other VR work streams, as I've talked about, in terms of skills training and development and clinical research. And if anyone has any questions on any of that, happy to take those when we finish. But James, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Sam. That was really helpful. I still believe you're young enough to put yourself in that bracket. So to round off, what have we learned? And I think, to be honest, we have to be truthful and say it's not easy. It's been pretty hard. We've had some really hard times, and that's for a variety of different reasons, but also a number of shared reasons. We've been dealing with a pandemic as an NHS for a very long time, and it's been really tiring for everybody involved. Although not all of us have been on the front line, we've been doing everything within our power to support those that are across our group of hospitals across the country. And whilst trying to drive forward an innovation agenda with a backdrop of a national pandemic is challenging, but also trying to do so with a directorate within an organisation that we generate our own revenue and our own income by working with the rest of the NHS, it makes it increasingly difficult. But also technology itself doesn't always play fair. And that's one of the messages we wanted to convey. Another one is that we believe as well that partnership working is key to our success. Working alone in isolation just puts barriers in our way, whether it's with other NHS organisations, whether it's with charities, philanthropists, or industry itself. We need to collaborate with everybody that's willing to collaborate with us in the right way, in the right setting, for the right purpose, so that we can go further, faster together. And together, we can then ensure that we do our best to cross that chasm in the law of diffusion of innovation. We work really hard to win the hearts and minds of those within the late majority, those that still insist that fax machines are the new era of digital and that refuse to surrender their pages, and still want a rotary phone in their living room on a lovely table that never gets touched, but often dusted. So that these ones, instead of being protagonists for digital, end up being our biggest champions. And I wanted to leave you with some of my thoughts around the principles to achieve that culture within the team. So we work really hard on having a progressive purpose as a directorate, a future vision that is almost crazy, that people can all get out of bed and join our cause to achieve. We work really hard on having a united, happy team. We've got a group of values and behaviours that have been co-created throughout our directorate, which really drive the culture that we have. And that means we've got a psychologically safe environment for all of our people to come to work and bring their whole selves, to be creative, to try new things without fear of being stigmatized or victimized, bullied or harassed for getting something wrong whilst they're trying to do something right. We learn from those failures and we're inspired by that shared purpose. We work really hard in making sure we know our competition. And by competition, I mean other technology enthusiasts, others that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We don't look at others and say, look at how they're doing it, look at how terrible they are. Rather, look at how hard they're trying. What can we learn from what they are doing? And that's why I've got the example at the bottom there of Blockbuster and Netflix. Most often commented that Blockbuster should have bought Netflix and they laughed them out the room, what a bunch of nitwits. But really, Blockbuster could have looked at Netflix, even if they didn't want to buy the company, and said, you know what, guys, they've got a great idea, great technology. How can we build on it? And that's what we work to do so that we can continue in building on other people's success and stay focused. And we're prepared to be agile with that. We're disruptive, yes, but we're not so precious that we're not happy to be disrupted. We need to be agile as a directorate, as an organisation, as an NHS, to make sure that we pivot as things occur. COVID definitely taught us that we don't know what's on the horizon or what's coming around the corner. Walt Disney famously sold all of his shares in Disney so that he could create Disney World, because he believed in that progressive purpose and he wanted to do something completely inspirational, crazy, and innovative, and he was successful with it. Kodak and Apple have a similar example. When Apple visited Kodak and witnessed the first graphical user interface, they completely changed their approach to line-driven computing and went down a graphical interface route, binning years and years of work. And that takes courageous leadership and understanding that as much as a leader, we're part of the success and we enjoy the plaudits and the awards and the pats on the back, we're also part of the failures too. And we're part of the struggle and the challenges. And so it's our role to be courageous and to make sure that that courage then cascades throughout our organizations, throughout our directorates, maintaining the ethics from when we first set out. Making sure that we're clear that it's okay to be happy, to be sad, to share our fears with our people, because they know if we care. And that's what's most important, to make sure that we care and provide an environment in which our people can thrive. So thank you so much. And that's exactly what I want to finish with. A huge debt of gratitude to our people that make this possible. These are some of the pictures of our wonderful, beautiful innovation, intelligent automation team that make all this technology come to life. And that, in partnership with the work that we do with our wonderful charity, we're really able to change people's lives. Thank you so much, John. I think it's time for me to pass back to you.
Thank you both very much. What an excellent presentation. Absolutely full of stuff I mostly understood, but absolutely full of inspiration and real excitement actually for the future. We've already got some questions coming in, which is brilliant. So I'm going to crack straight on with those. The first one, you alluded to your project with London Ambulance Service and A&Es, and a lot of what you're dealing with, I guess, is helping the NHS to meet demand. But you, of course, must have a lot of demands on yourselves. So what do you do to manage what must be countless requests for help from your colleagues? And how do you do that without, letting people down? What's your process?
It's a great question. And arguably it's a good problem to have. And I think as well, it's a sign of that you're hitting the right place within your target market, for want of a better term. I'll come to Sam to expand on it in just a second, but I think it's important for us to take an objective view to how we prioritize and how we think through what it is we're able to attack next. Sam?
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance because my background is transformation and operational management. So I know from experience the challenges that many colleagues are going through. And we're here to support people in trying to improve some of those. But I think it's also about having a clear USP. So we are an innovation team and we build digital products and we do robotic process automation and we do a lot around new technologies. But we don't do standard IT and we don't do standard sort of program project management. So quite often we'll have people coming to us with issues that they might think needs to be an app, but actually it's about signposting people to the right team or making sure that those people are supported through a requirements gathering process or something like that. So we have a digital innovation steering group, which is our main forum for proposals to come through, and we support people who bring things to that. But we also want to foster a culture of collaboration and innovation within the trust. So there's a balance between that top-down, prioritization, making sure we're focusing on the right things, and bottom-up, fostering that culture of innovation. Because you might have a clinician who's created a product in his shed or her shed that you bring to that group, and it's actually something really amazing. So it's both. And I think actually working collaboratively with other teams in the trust helps us to be able to signpost people most effectively, and managing expectations around what we can and can't do, particularly around robotic process automation, because people often think you can automate everything, and you pretty much can, but it's hard if it's, the existing process is done by paper and carrier pigeon or fax, which we know that in the NHS sometimes they still are. So yeah, we just try and work really collaboratively with people to understand the problem, understand user requirements, and then we go from there accordingly. But it is a challenge, no doubt.
Yeah, I feel as someone that runs an organisation which cannot meet the demands that we've got on us, I feel your pain, definitely. And we've got a follow-up question to that, which is how you balance being swift and nimble with keeping your eyes on the strategic horizon.
So we take it, all of our teams. So we're broken down between developers, consultants, analysts, operational team, user experience designers, product managers, and all of us are little nerds at heart, and that really helps, because we're little nerds that love healthcare, that love changing people's lives. So everybody, without even being asked to, has that flair or that interest just naturally. But we've also recruited others that aren't techies at heart, but what's happened is it's lit a fire in them naturally, and where they may have joined the team and like, oh, don't know if I can do this, I don't really know much about technology. Well, you've got a woman sat in front of you who knew nothing about virtual reality and is now the SRO for our entire immersive technology. It just spoke to you absolutely perfectly and now speaks on an international stage about the deployment of XR in health, which is testament to the fact that we have that culture that inspires people to want to learn more and upskill themselves in what's relevant in technology, and then bring that into their working life. And that means, John, what's really great about that is we don't have to have a specific governed process in which we horizon scan and we review stuff. It could be laborious and painful, and then people are grabbing forks and shoving them in their eyes, but it becomes really tedious and painful. This makes it really enjoyable, and we attribute a portion of our people's time for passion projects too, to really facilitate that and light a fire under that.
Brilliant. Oh, we've got a great question from Amit Bakai, which is, first of all, it says, amazing presentation, very exciting. How do we pioneer a path to attract the data, ML and AI scientists into the NHS that we need, given the Goldacre review showed just how short we are of data scientists in the NHS?
Thank you for the question, Amit. Thank you for the complexity of the question as well. Remind me not to buy you a beer. So that's a real challenge, isn't it, right? And the truth of the matter is, here at the Royal Free and at every other NHS organisation, we are up against Google, Meta, Amazon, and everybody else in the world, including the big four consultancies. Everyone is after data scientists. Where it is that we separate ourselves isn't just in this situation, but it's across everybody that we attract to our organisation, is that purpose and that future state vision. By speaking about why we do what we do, then we attract the right people to come and work with us, whatever their skill set, whether they be data scientists or otherwise. And that's how we recruit, and retain our people, because we fight vigorously for that purpose, for that passion, and we distill that in everything that we do. Sam, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got examples of people who have taken significant pay cuts to come and join us. We've got a senior software developer who's worked in Switzerland and internationally and kind of chose to come and join us. We've got someone who was an senior analyst at Gartner for 20 years and has come to join us as an innovation consultant, and many more examples. So there is absolutely, as James says, there is a gap anyway. It's not that those people are out there, and we've had similar things with robotic process automation developers where we've had people take significant jumps to come and join us. But COVID's been a big part of that, actually, and a lot of people who have moved into the NHS after their COVID experience, or people valuing the NHS or seeing the hospital documentary, which was so successful and powerful, and they want to make an impact. And actually money isn't always the most important thing. So I think we have a really great opportunity and a foundation to build on from the data science point of view. And you'll know our innovation consultant Katie Tucker, who is a data geek, as she would say, and we are currently carving that path to be able to bring in more people, not just through traditional routes, but actually working with organizations like Multiverse, and trying to bring in underrepresented groups as well, because you don't have to have a traditional university path to those roles, and that's really important to us as well, having diversity in our team of experience and all circumstances.
Great, thank you so much. We've got a question about philanthropy. So you've touched on the fact that we obviously partner with you to support some of your projects, which we're absolutely delighted to do. It's always a pleasure being able to talk to donors and supporters about the stuff that we've done with you. Like everybody's eyes light up whenever we talk about virtual reality, and I've seen the impact that lots of those have had on our staff, and hopefully in due course as well on our patients. You've had the opportunity to meet some of our donors, because I think you guys are sometimes viewed as a little bit harder to get your head around. So we like to make sure that our donors get the skinny from you guys rather than trying to get it from me. What's that been like for you to experience our side of the fence and meet our donors?
It's been really exciting, to be honest, John. It's been exciting. I was absolutely, beside myself with fear, to be honest, because some of the philanthropists, you look at these people, they're obviously been successful in business, in life, or have a family that they oversee large sums of money. And here I am, little Jimbo from the streets of North London, who's chatting to them about flashy lights and computer stuff. And I often feel out of my depth and often the most underqualified person in the room. So I walk in with that kind of view, but also a huge badge of pride to represent the Royal Free, and to be able to, my goal is to kind of shift the mindset. I often believe that the predisposed mindset is, as we said before, that the NHS is slow, stale, what new is coming from it, and then we're able to run through just some of the stuff we're doing. I mean, what we presented today is just a snapshot of what we're capable of, and then to see the difference after from that initial, I build up that story beforehand, is really exciting. And then conversation just spurs, and we're able to then talk about what it is that we can do together, what we can build. And I really think there's a bi-directional learning as well. Like I said, these people are really successful. They've done great things, and we're able to learn from them, because we have a commercial offering, how it is that we can scale to be more sustainable. What is it that we're missing in the marketplace that they've done, or they've seen, or they've experienced, that can help us to be more successful for our organization and maximize how it is we bring more into the Royal Free.
Absolutely. And I think, certainly from my experience, one of the things that the philanthropists that we tell your story to get really excited about is almost what you opened with, which is by the NHS for the NHS, this sense that actually the NHS, through an incredible amount of pressure in the last few years that you've alluded to, the NHS is still capable of generating its own ideas, scaling those up, rolling those out at scale. I think there's a really inspirational story for us to be telling about what you've achieved, not just here. I think it's, we are enormously lucky to benefit from your influence within the trusts and our hospitals here. But like you said several times, a lot of what you're doing has a massive impact beyond simply North London. And I think we should be immensely proud of what we've got through you, and I think certainly from the charity standpoint, we're really delighted to be able to support you. I'm going to fit in one more question because we're just in the sort of dying stages, and it's linked to that actually. You said right at the top of the presentation that that it's unusual to have a consultancy like you in a trust. Are there others trying to walk this same path? And if there aren't, are you is this the sort of thing you'd like to see replicated at every trust across the country, or do you think there's something particular about us and the way we work that means it's only going to work here?
I think it's a different concept, but I also don't believe, I mean, I don't know how popular this statement will be, but the Royal Free can't solve the country's problems alone. Okay, we just have to be realistic about that. But we can definitely be the leading light and break the ice so it makes it easier for everybody else to do the same. And so we run a national innovation forum for other innovators around the country. And these aren't those that have like quarter of their role dedicated to being innovative. Innovation leads, heads of innovation, associate directors of innovation, that hierarchy is left at the door. If innovation's within your role, you're welcome to the forum. And what that means is, instead of being a lone voice within your organization, we now have like a national network of those that are trying to push new frontiers, which is really, really helpful. And like I mentioned about that progressive purpose, our goal is maybe the Royal Free can't solve the country's problems, but we can most definitely set that progressive purpose and that reason for doing and that belief that it's possible. And if other organizations can point to us at executive groups where they're weighing up the investment case in should we invest in innovation and the team or should we not, now they can point at something not only that's in play but is at scale. There's nearly 50 of us in the directorate now, and that is true evidence that it's well worth the investment from any primary or secondary care provider in spinning up an innovation directorate. And what we've learned, our approach, our methodology, our processes, our operational structure is freely available to any NHS organisation within this country for them to take, replicate and learn from.
Brilliant. Oh, what an excellent place for us to stop. Thank you very much indeed. It's only left then for me to thank our speakers very much indeed for sharing their evening with us, and thank our attendees for coming along to hear about this. Things like the VR therapy program that we're funding represent just one of the ways that we try to support innovation at our trust. We're really proud that one of the things we're able to do is to support early stage projects that might not otherwise attract funding, and that funding is always only possible thanks to the generosity of people who donate to the charity. Lots of you who've donated to our appeals in the past. Thank you very much for your support. If you've enjoyed tonight's talk, don't forget the entire series is available on our YouTube channel for you to watch again or share with friends and colleagues. Thank you very much indeed for your support, and good night.